1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Monday show live. Hello and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. It is the Monday show. We are live and I am your host Ian Croll, and joining me in the Royal Blue studio today to talk all things Everton, and Tottenham, we have Joe Thomas and Chris Beesley. The dynamics changed in this podcast room right now because you usually sit there and Chris usually sits there, so my head is absolutely blown. But anyway, how are things, Joe? All good?
Yeah, not bad, cheers. Not bad. Looking forward to kind of getting into the weeds of this one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I think before we came on here, you said that this one might be a bit of a disagreeable podcast, but we will see. We'll see how we get on. Chris, how are things? All good?
I just hope I'm all right because my stomach's usually rumbling at the best of times on this 11:30 slot, and with the clock's going back, you know. Yeah.
Well,
I hope I'm all right.
What have you got on your butties today? Tell us. You haven't told anyone for a while.
I don't know. You see, until I open them up and the foil there, so you know, it could be a surprise for me. I mean, want to be some kind of meat and want to be some kind of cheese, and if not, there'll be trouble.
Wow. Okay, well, we'll quickly...
We've got so much to talk to, and we've ended up down that rabbit hole already.
No,
I'd just like to apologise to the listeners.
Everyone loves a good Chris Beesley sandwich story.
Yeah.
Not after a 3-0 defeat at home.
No, I mean, to be fair...
We need to get into the meat of this sandwich, don't we?
Okay, Everton. Today's agenda, obviously Everton well beaten by Spurs yesterday. A 3-0 defeat, the first competitive defeat at the new stadium. Couple of questions I guess we'll try and answer. Did Everton play well? Was a 3-0 scoreline flattering to Spurs? Were Everton toothless? We'll answer all these questions during the show and more. As always, give us a thumbs up and drop us a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Just a quick word for our sponsor, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/EFC. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And to find more information, the link is in the podcast episode description box. That is on YouTube, as well as Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcasts as well. Joe, might as well get into it. Your reaction to Everton's 3-0 defeat?
Tough one to assess, really, because I know that there'll be elements of my verdict that people disagree with. I don't think it was a 3-0. I know the scoreline was 3-0, but I don't think that was a 3-0 performance. I thought Everton were fine for large parts of that game, and I thought in some parts they were actually quite good. I do think that some familiar frailties and vulnerabilities and limitations showed up. And I think Moyes said after the game he could take some positives from it. I'm not sure I take that many positives from it, but I do think that this is a side that continues to show a degree of progress, but where it's being held back are becoming recurring themes. And I think this is probably a good inflection point for this part of the season now. I think we know enough about this group of players and the way that they play together to kind of reach a few firmer judgments, and my hope is that they will influence decisions going forward, because I think Everton were reasonably unlucky last night. I think they came up against a better team, and I think that most teams in the Premier League are better than Everton, and I think that's understandable when you look at the history of recent years. And I think the Everton side that they've got in the group of players, they've got are good enough to get good results against most of the teams in the Premier League on their day. where they're not good enough is they're not good enough to overcome good opposition when the decisions go against them and when the 50-50s go against them. And I think they did have a bit of bad luck yesterday, but I think now the focus has to go on to doing what they can to make some of them 50-50s, some of them chance moments in the game, do more to make sure they go in Everton's favour. And I think that right now Everton aren't perhaps playing to the best of their abilities, because I think that some players are being sacrificed for others, and I think some players are being asked to do jobs that don't really fit within their capabilities, and I think that we're starting to see that jar a little bit more, and I think that was very obvious last night with a handful of players.
And just want to pick up on, you said you felt we were unlucky. In what sense did you feel we were unlucky? Obviously the disallowed goal, but I mean, what was your thoughts on the disallowed goal?
I mean, unlucky might be a little bit strong for where they were, but I think that I think some of the decisions were frustrating, and my issue with the decisions making probably less the key incidents. I think it's incredibly galling to see the Jake O'Brien goal disallowed, because I think that if Illiman and and Jack Grealish aren't in an offside position, I still don't think he saves that. But they are offside and they are interfering with play. So it's frustrating, but I think it's the right decision. I'm frustrated. I think the second goal warranted a little bit more examination. I think that Van der Ven, I think Pickford should probably do better throughout that game from set pieces, but Spurs are very good at set pieces, very strong for them. And I think he clearly, he clearly gets pushed by Van der Ven in the build-up to that game. He's therefore off balance when the ball comes in. There is an argument about whether or not he should be stronger, but I do think that perhaps warranted more of a look at than we probably got. Because I do think there was pressure on the keeper, and I think that maybe not go so far as to say it's the wrong decision, but I think that, and I think maybe even the penalty incident on Gay, I don't think they're outrageous decisions by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think on another day, foul gets given on Pickford for the second goal, penalty gets given for Gay, and then you've got a different game. My issue with Pawson, to be honest, yesterday was less those decisions, though, and more the general run of play. If you look at, I think we were 6 minutes in, and Grealish cuts inside Pedro Porro, and he tackles him behind, and his studs go down Grealish's shins. It's not malicious, it's not a red card, not making anything like that. But at any point beyond the 10th minute in that game, that's a yellow card. And then all of a sudden, you've got Grealish, and we know how many fouls he draws, running at fullback for 85 minutes, he's on a yellow card, and it changes the dynamic down that flank. 70 minutes in, Rodrigo Bentancur, Everton are launching a counter-attack, and Grealish cuts inside, and Bentancur just takes his legs. It's a cynical foul. We all want our players to do those in those moments. They are clever tactical fouls, but it's obviously a yellow card. Doesn't get it. Instead, Grealish gets a yellow card for complaining that he's not getting enough protection. And it was more just that general run of play of those type of decisions not kind of going Everton's way. And like I say, I think this Everton side is good enough to beat most teams in this Premier League on their day, but their limitations are such that they probably can't overcome good opposition, and maybe those 50-50s, maybe those tight decisions going against them as well. Particularly not when, and this goes on to my final point about the kind of limitations about them, particularly when you don't take the chances that come your way, when you have someone like, when Beto doesn't score in the first 5 minutes, etc., or when you can't produce adequate support in the final third for Ndiaye and Grealish. Unfortunately, they're going to keep butting the ceiling of their limitations, and that's where I want to kind of move forward from maybe this game, or at least from the next international break, and have a look perhaps at, there are lots of things this Everton side's doing well, but there are lots of things that it's not doing good enough, and they're a drag on what Everton are trying to achieve this season. I think we need to be honest about what Everton are trying to achieve this season, and I think that if we don't think it's going to, there are lots of people, and the feeling in Finch Farm is certainly they can qualify for Europe or make a good go at it. I wonder whether or not, I wonder how realistic that is, like breaking into the top 7. I know 9 got in this time round, but normally it's a top 7. And I wonder if maybe we should be a little bit more open to exploring some of the players that are in that squad, giving them more minutes and trying to work out if there's a different dynamic or a different balance there that might better suit this group of players. Because, whilst last night, I think they were unlucky in some respects, in others, we're seeing recurring themes, and I think Everton could do more, and I think Everton and Moyes could do more to help themselves in some of the big moments in games.
I think what Joe just said there, just to finish off, reoccurring themes is probably something I would agree with him on, Chris. I don't think there's any denying that we did have a couple of chances yesterday, and I think without a doubt Beto has got to do better in certain areas. For you, is it a case of maybe picking up on what Joe said, being a little bit unlucky, fine margins, missed chances, or is there something underlying a little bit deeper there that the manager could change, or just not doing at this moment in time?
Yeah, we're getting lots of comments, and we can see them all there as we're going along there. I was looking at a few as Joe was talking there, and I think Daniel Reel, one of them, from him, he summed it up quite well, I thought, in terms of saying obviously they were soft goals. Everton, he felt, actually played all right for a long time, but they were soft goals and obviously key moments really, and I'd kind of go along with that theme. It's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration this morning, and it's understandable. Given the magnitude of the way things fell apart last night. Yeah, I think that the frustrations are that maybe it's become a little bit predictable for better or for worse. As like we're saying, it has been a breath of fresh air in what they're trying to do, and with Grealish, Dewsbury, Haaland and Dye, the way they're playing, but it's not happening, is it, for the strikers? And you just wonder, is there a predictability about it all when you've got those other options in the squad? Maybe they're not doing well enough. We spoke on the preview pod about your admiration for Charlie Alcaraz and what he'd done in the 10 coming on, but then obviously he didn't do it on the left wing at City, so he dropped back to the bench again, and then see Diblin didn't get a run out again. We saw Merlin roll again, and I spoke to him after the game, and maybe he'll offer a bit of a different dynamic in midfield. We've got a piece coming up on that, but yeah, I just felt the key moments, maybe Everton let themselves down, and that was disappointing. But you are concerned that without being panic stations, I don't think Everton will be embroiled in the relegation zone. But the table today isn't looking too hot, is it? In terms, I know it's a close division at the moment, but yeah, just disappointing really that they were perhaps looking a bit predictable now, and that where's the plan B? Is there a scope to mix things up a bit?
I mean, I don't want to really speak about recruitment, Joe, but I know people are saying, well, the strikers aren't good enough, the pair and Beto and Barry, and it's hard to disagree at this moment in time. We've got 10 games to go until the January transfer window opens, 30 points to play for. We can't just harp on and look ahead to the transfer window. We've got to try and find a solution now within these next 10 games. It seems to me that it's same old predictable line or predictable passages of play, predictable build up from the back, a slow, laboured, too much emphasis on Illiman and Dye, too much emphasis on a Jack Grealish, who I know, Chris, you gave him a 7 yesterday, but he had that shot early on. I just felt like he's isolated at times, and Illiman and Dye, he's the only real penetration that we've got at this moment in time. He'll take 2 or 3 players on to try and be direct, and he's got no overlap behind him, and he just runs into a brick wall. I think there's options there for Moyes to look at that squad and that team and think, what can we do better? What can we change that will, give that team greater balance? And I think the midfield trio of Garner Gay, James Garner and Ilman Dye is just not working at this moment in time. The weak in the transition, and every time the opposition get the ball and we lose the ball, we just overrun.
Yeah, I think this is an area where Everton are genuinely unlucky, because I think that the obvious solution to that, and what a solution it was going to be, was Jared Branthwaite coming back in. Because if you add him into that side, all of a sudden, Everton are so weak in defending transition, because, like I said on this pod a few times, like they're stuck between 2 ways of playing at the moment. They now have an attack that is really comfortable with popping the ball around in the final third on the edge of the opposition box. They've got those 3 attacking midfielders, and then they get joined by Garner, and obviously not by the fullbacks as much as we would like. But you almost have an attack that wants to play in the final third, the attacking final third. But you have a defence that, because for all that Keane and Tarkowski bring to the side, one thing they don't do is pace, and because of that, they tend to sit back a lot deeper. So you almost have an attack that wants to play in the final third, attacking wise, a defence that wants to stay in the final third from a defensive perspective. Then you end up with this big chasm in the middle where Garner and Gay and the fullbacks can't cover all that space and do all those jobs. It's why I haven't had so much problem with players that are capable of running from deep with the ball, like we saw Silencio Somerville cause so many issues for West Ham a couple of weeks ago for him, because they just don't really seem to know how to manage that space in between defence and attack. Now, Jared Branthwaite coming back, well, one, he's one of the best young defenders in Europe, so that is always going to help. But because of his aggressiveness, because of his stature, because of his pace, that defence then has to, and because of his dynamic with Tarkowski and probably with Mikolenko on the left, all of a sudden that defence can move 10, 15 yards further forward, and everything becomes that bit more coherence. You know, those gaps in the middle of the pitch or between defence and attack start to shorten, and everything makes a lot more sense. And obviously Everton are then more open to the ball over the top, but because they've got Branthwaite there, they're more capable of defending against it. So I think the hope would probably be that Everton could kind of get through the first, 7 or 8 games of the season, or maybe 5 or 6 games of the season, make progress while they're doing so, and then Branthwaite comes in, and then Branthwaite is your natural, he's your natural incoming to take what the side is to its next level. And obviously that's been ripped away from them because of the injury setback. What I do think is, I do wonder if, Branthwaite is clearly an option that's not going to be available to them for a while now. But like you say, there's a long time before January. There's only so much they'll be able to do in January. And we have to maintain perspective. There was only so much they could do in the summer window, and there's only so much they could do in January. This is going to have to be, for Everton to get to the type of place where we probably all want them to be, it's going to take years and years of just layering up on transfer windows. That's the only way you're going to be able to do it. You can't fix all these problems in one window. You just can't. You just got to try and make progress, sustain progress step by step. I think Everton made some progress. I think they can probably make a little bit more. And I wonder if now is the time to maybe say, look, they haven't got perfect solutions in all these positions, particularly at right back. And they should have signed the right back in the summer. But I think we all agree on that. They did try to with Kenny Tete, but I'm not quite sure how they went from just missing out on Kenny Tete to then not signing a right back at all in the remaining of the transfer window because a long time left. But I would be interested in maybe saying, okay, well, Branthwaite can't come in and have the impact on the side that we wanted him to. Jake O'Brien's no slouch. He's got similar, he's a big, physical, strong lad. He can be aggressive and he's got pace. Is it time to maybe have a look at moving him into centre-back to see whether or not he can do to the side what we hope Branthwaite would, and maybe bring that defence up 10 yards and still be effective at dealing with anyone because of, say, he's got the recovery pace. What that you then do at right back is a question, and there are other areas as well which I think are problematic. But I do think that we need to start looking at a few of these solutions now, because you're right, Everton are becoming predictable. I thought Grealish played well last night. I thought Ndiaye played well last night. And for all that teams are doubling up on him, whether it be Man City, whether it be Tottenham, whether it be someone else, he's still getting through. We can look at the table now, and obviously it doesn't read as well as it did, 3 days ago, because like Moyes said would happen last week, everyone's taking points off each other. It's clearly going to be a lot more of a quagmire in the middle of the table and maybe the bottom half of the table. But this for all that we have understandable frustrations about some of the results that haven't been picking up recently, in the first 5 minutes against Tottenham, Aston Villa and Man City, Everton have put a chance on a plate. Maybe not a plate that's a little bit harsh, but Beto's had a very good opportunity in the first 5 minutes that he hasn't taken. Everton haven't won any of those games. And it's just something as simple as him, maybe not doesn't score all 3, but even if he scores 1 of those 3 or 2 of those 3, the table again looks very different. Everton aren't very far off from being a better side than what they currently are and getting better results than they currently are getting. And it's understandable it's going to take time to maybe get to that point where they can consistently do that. But I don't think this is any time for panic or anything like that. But I do think that Moyes just probably has to have a reassess. Look at what he's asking of Mikolenko. Play Mikolenko so high up and ask him to kind of be relevant in the final third is it's just not Mikolenko's game. It's not necessarily Mikolenko's fault. We know he's more of a defensive left back than an attacking one. I don't think he had a good game yesterday from either perspective. But if you're asking your left back to play more of a role in the opposition half and on the back line, the other defence, well, maybe it's time to look at what personnel you put there. And the same on right back. Clearly, for all that Ndiaye's doing well on the right, he would benefit from having more support. It's not Jake O'Brien's fault that he's done very, very well at adapting to right back. But he is a centre-back, and he isn't going to suddenly, whilst he has progressed in his attacking attributes, he isn't going to suddenly start bursting onto the to the byline and whipping in dangerous crosses all the time to help Ndiaye. So who else could do that? Or if you don't want if there isn't anyone that can do that, do you try and have a different style of play? And same with Beto. Look, Beto's missed some big chances, but they're also just not playing to his style. He is not a fox in the box, link up man on the edge of it, and then contort your body, twist it to get the shot on target in the 6-yard box when a cross comes your way or is deflected into your path. At some point, it might be better off looking to see how Everton play to the best of the team's ability rather than play to the best of Ndiaye and Grealish's ability.
Well, can I just jump in for what you're saying? Moyes recognised that and said that in his pre-City press conference, I think, didn't he? He said, well, Beto's struggling because of the transition that we've made and the style of play. So why is he not recognising that in his team selections? If we're not playing or doesn't want to play to Beto's strengths, then Beto should not be in the team.
Well, he doesn't necessarily have many options, does he? Because Tiena Barry's clearly a work in progress, but is also a player that would probably be better. And I thought he played quite well actually when he came on yesterday, Barry. But he's another player that is probably of a similar mould where he wants to be chasing balls over the top. So it is tough because what Beto does do is he does bring that physicality in and around the box. And I still do think that if he was to get that one, it's why the save in the second half. Again, for all of the frustrations of yesterday, Vicario made 3 very, very good saves in that match. And it wouldn't have taken, it was only a matter of inches. And all of a sudden, 55 minutes in, Beto scored a goal. He's off the mark. Maybe that sets him alight. And I thought Everton were in that game all the way until the 3rd goal. All the way until maybe the 85th minute. I thought if they got 1, they could get 2. Obviously, they didn't get the 1, but they're not that far off. But yeah, they do have to think about what more they can do. I wonder whether, I think Keenan Dewsbury Hall as a 10 is probably something that needs to be looked at. I think he's a wonderful player. So technically gifted, but I think that maybe now's the time to either look at maybe Carlos Alcaraz in that 10 or drop, which is something I might do, is I might just not play with a 10, just play with 3 midfielders and drop Keenan Dewsbury Hall a bit deeper. We've got Merlin Roll there as well. Another option is that I like the idea. I like the idea of having Grealish. If you want to play with a 10, I like the idea of having Grealish and Ndiaye next to each other so that they can pop off each other. I like the idea of having Ndiaye in his favourite position on the left and Grealish in the 10, and he can go both ways. And maybe that gives you a chance to bring Diblin on down the right and give him a few more minutes because that would be useful as well. There are lots of different ways that Moyes can experiment with this side, and not all of them will definitely lead to improvement. But now is the time to start looking for that improvement, I think.
I mean, Chris, do you not see the frustration then for the 3-4 options, different options that Joe's just kind of addressed there? Do you not see the frustration from my point of view? I've been saying it for weeks, from some fans' point of view, that if you don't think you're playing to your striker's strengths, either drop him from the team or change the way you're going to play, or change the players behind him that are going to enable him to play to his strengths. And again, this is where the predictability comes in. It's same old, and this is not something that was just from yesterday. I think my judgment of it being a poor performance stems back from probably previous games. Don't get me wrong, we were poor against Crystal Palace. Palace were the better team. Second half, we obviously made a couple of changes, and you can quite clearly see that Alcaraz and Beto, they like to play together. Again, I'm not saying Alcaraz is the messiah and the be-all and end-all of what Everton can do, but Moyes has stated himself publicly that, well, actually our strikers struggling to adapt to the way we're playing, and it's no coincidence that we're not scoring goals if the manager can say that and come out and say that publicly. Yeah,
I just wonder what he's seeing at Finch Farm, because we saw it back in February when Joe and I were down at Sellers Park. I mean, it was when Alcaraz had the assist and then he scored as well in his first game. They were combining all the way back then they signed him at the end of the last season. Maybe it seemed like one that they had to do with the money, but then a bit like we were Dwight McNeil's falling down the pecking order. He goes and signs 1, 2, 3 these new attacking midfielders in August, and all of a sudden he's struggling to get a game. It is interesting, like as we've talked about, the idea of it becoming predictable, and that maybe there should be more options there. Even if you think they're your best 3 on paper, and they're the ones who've got the system that you've worked with in the early weeks of the season, over the course of a Premier League campaign, you're going to have to mix things up in terms of horses for courses and different players coming in. There's so much now with the 5 substitutes rule. I mean, we were talking on the podcast a few weeks ago, even talk of a 6th substitute possibly coming in. It's got to not just different sort of lineups and different tactics for different games to start with. You got to be, in game changes as well. And I think Moyes alluded to that in that he felt that those players could contribute at various times, but it is the same old when it comes to the starting 11. So I just wonder now, going up to Sunderland, is that going to be the changes there? Because talking about incremental growth, and I suppose things will sort of even out over the course of the season. They've had an incredible start. They've gone and done something that Everton haven't done in 30 years. Gone and won at Chelsea. I mean, they've come up from the Championship. So I said, you could say in the defence, the proof will be in the pudding come May where they finish. But at the moment, you look where they are and how they've come from nowhere. So yeah, I think that for whatever our thoughts are about Alcaraz or the different players and who's best or where to play Keane and Dewsbury Hall, and I agree to a certain extent. I think that we all saw, I said this the other day, we all saw what he could do against Rome in that first friendly. It was like, wow. The way he can carry the ball and what the instant impact he had. But he needs to be doing more. I think there were times yesterday we were frustrated. Maybe he didn't take the shot on when he should have done, or I think he wasted that chance when Grealish had the chance and then it rebounded it over the bar with the rebound. So, yeah, it is an interesting one, what you actually do with Keane and Dewsbury Hall and what you do with the other options in there. Because, like we said, maybe Diblin isn't showing it at training just yet, but obviously a lot of our viewers have mentioned about the money that was spent on him over the summer, and you talk about long-term projects and stuff, but I think we were expecting to see a bit more from Diblin by this point, and we know he's one for the future. But I mean, the way they were talking about him down at Southampton, they were really excited about him, and he's already had a season in the Premier League. So we probably would have been expected to see more of him as well as Alcaraz so far.
I mean, the point was made yesterday from Tony in the post-match podcast, the amount of millions of pounds worth of players on the substitutes bench that aren't just getting a look in. I think that is a concern which, we can address at some point. I mean, Joe, I was going to bring this up. It's this comment from Nathan Clare. It's been a bit of a running theme, shall we say, over the course of the season. Lack of substitutes or lack of reacting to moments from the manager when things aren't maybe going well. So Nathan Clare says, Spurs made subs before us yesterday, really slow subs, did not help. I mean, again, I stated this in the post-match pod yesterday. I was really disappointed. 2-0 down. I can understand Moyes' belief that he wanted to give the players who were already on the pitch that chance to make it right in the second half. But when you can see, visually see that the midfield is being overrun and it's just not working to an extent, and then Tottenham go and make their subs on the 60th minute before us, and then we make our subs on the 66th minute with Maitland Roll and Tieno Barry coming on. Again, just very disappointed of the manager's reading of the game. Maybe that's a little bit too harsh, but I mean, Tony made the argument yesterday, well, if he'd made the subs on 45 minutes, 50 minutes, would it have made any difference? Obviously, it's impossible to answer that question, but what I do know is that when Maitland Roll came on, I felt we looked a little bit more assured in midfield. And can you see him making an appearance or a starting appearance on Monday?
I'm not sure if he'll start, but Moyes is a big fan of Maitland Roll. Wrote a story on, I spoke to Moyes about him on Friday afternoon, and I think if he replicates what he does at Finch Farm on the pitch, he's going to be a big player for Everton. I don't think Everton's midfield was overrun in the second half last night. I think that it was the brutal reality of the situation once Spurs got the second goal, that it meant that they had something to defend in the second half, and they've got a group of players there that are very, very good at defending the box, and it was very difficult for having to break through. But that being said, that group of players still continue to create chances, and if Beto's goal goes in, or if a great save from Vicario from Ndiaye from the deflected effort, penalty maybe goes for you against. I think if the penalty's given, I think it doesn't get overturned, and then all of a sudden, I maintain that for most of that second half, I thought if Everton got one, they'd get back into it. I didn't think they were a million miles away, but. You just look at the quality of that Spurs side and the defence they've got and the midfield they've got, and it is very good, and it is a lot better than what Everton have got. So there's always going to be difficulties there. I do think that there are issues with the amount of substitutes he's making and the time that he's making. I can't. I think we're probably all in agreement here. I can't quite work out why Alcaraz isn't getting more of an opportunity. He was so good at the back end of last season and so good at inspiring, Everton going forward. I either scored goals or set up goals. On the hour mark, to not start looking at someone that we know is a relative proven quantity, even just for fresh legs, it doesn't make much sense to me. 7
minutes he got yesterday.
Yeah, it's been a feature, hasn't it? Like, it's just it's the whole kind. I mean, you look at when they signed him, they've given him a 2-year deal with an option of a third. In an era where it tends to be 5-6 year contracts being handed out, he's a young player who's done really well. You always get the sense that Moyes doesn't quite have the faith in him that I think a lot of us do, and I don't really understand it, to be perfectly honest. I don't understand why, if something's not working, you don't try it when you've got the players they've got on the bench that they did have. Give Diblin a go. Again, I keep coming back to Mikolenko, and whilst I don't think Mikolenko's having a particularly good season, I want to stress that I'm not necessarily blaming him for a lot of this, but once you're 2-0 down and you get to the last 15-20 minutes, if you're going to ask him to play so high, and it's a common theme, we saw it against Man City a lot. We were sat against Man City last week, we were sat in front of the Everton analysts, and whenever Everton had the ball at centre-back, you could see that O'Brien and Mikolenko, one of them, sometimes both, would push really high onto the opposition fullback. Or where the opposition fullback should be. Depending on where the game was, the switch was always on to them in space. And they were crying out for Michael Keane to hit it and try and release those players. And sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But the reality is neither of them are players that are particularly dynamic going forward. It isn't their fault necessarily. They're not just that type of player. But when you get to the last 20 minutes, I don't know why. It's clear that Moyes has reservations about Adam Asnou, but most of those are defensive and physical. He ain't going to get any better just sitting on the bench for 90 minutes. He's still paid millions of pounds from Bayern Munich. He has come through the Barcelona academy. He has been at Bayern Munich. He did play some games in La Liga last season, albeit for the side that finished bottom. The consensus seems to be that attacking is his best format. Well, we know Mikolenko can't really do much in the final third. We can see that he's knackered. We can see that Everton are 2-0 down. We can see that Grealish is crying out for someone to make an overlapping run. Even if you've got reservations about Asnou, in that situation, I don't really know why you don't put him on. I don't know why I don't understand how they can be so concerned about him that they're going, it's not worth 15 minutes there. So that's interesting. Diblin not getting on is interesting as well. Like I say, I have some sympathy for the thing that I don't think it necessarily wasn't working for Everton yesterday. I think they created more chances and the better chances from open play. And I think that it's a different game again if that goal gets ruled out on half-time. I'm not saying it definitely should have been ruled out, but I think that we've all probably seen situations where that goal is disallowed, and it's a different game if Thomas Frank can't come out in the second half to defend a 2-0 lead with the players that he's got. So again, you're kind of going back to some of them bigger moments where yes, Everton are flattering to deceive in some elements, but also if a referee makes a slightly different decision, or if a ball bounces a slightly different way, or Vicario only makes two really good saves instead of 3, also Everton are right back in it. And again, when you look at the disparity of resources, as excited as we are about Everton's progress, there is a long way to go, and it's games like that show it.
I think just on your point of Asnou not starting.
Not starting, but you just have nothing to lose in that last 15 minutes.
No, I agree with you, and Chris will probably remember this as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's a bit of a common theme with David Moyes, with young players, where he'll give them a chance, and if they make a mistake or they have a poor performance, he'll literally just drop them and bomb them out to the side, and they just won't get a look in. I mean, I was just trying to think of examples there. So obviously Asnou, he made a terrible mistake against Roma. Diblin, obviously when he's come on, again, I don't think his minutes have been managed very well by Moyes, to be fair, but again, he's not getting a look in at all. Do you ever remember when we played Blackburn? This is obviously going back years ago, in Moyes' first stint, when Barkley first came into the side.
Okay, yeah.
Played Blackburn away, and everyone was like, this kid is going to be the next big thing. And I think he made a mistake, Barkley, and then you just never saw Barkley again for the remainder of the season. I don't know whether it's just a mindset for David Moyes. They're just three examples, and obviously one from back a good couple of years ago. But the problem this time round is that we spent over 40 million on Tyler Diblin. We spent 8 million on Asnu. Barkley, you could understand because he's a youth player coming through. You know, these are decisions that the David Moyes and the recruitment team has made. I mean, I don't know. I mean, go on, Chris. Go on. Sorry.
What he would do is, in David Moyes' defence, look at the best left back in Everton's Premier League history. Leighton Baines, now a cornerstone of his coaching staff. When Leighton Baines came to Everton, he wasn't like Diblin. He played a bit more than Diblin, but he was the most expensive defender in Everton's history at the time. I mean, back in 2007, same summer that they signed Jagielka, and it took him a while. We all remember Julian Lescott was playing left back, similar to Jake O'Brien at right back now. And for a good few months, Baines was just bits and pieces here and there. I mean, he's obviously well ahead of Adam Masnu in his development, but it took him time, and then he was vindicated in the long term. So if we're going to be, in fairness to David Moyes, he got it right, and he proved to be Everton's best ever left back of the modern era. And I'm not saying Aston will do anything like that, or obviously with Diblin as well, but they played the long game. We expect things like straight away, because of a big fee has been paid, I guess, like with Tyler Diblin more so than Asnu. And to be fair to David Moyes, he was kind of saying, as much as the fans might not have liked it from the start, he was saying, with Asnu, he's not quite ready in terms of for Premier League football, but we like what he sees, what we've seen of him, and we think he can offer us something going forward. But we just want everything straight. I mean, it's a bit indicative of society now. I've seen people questioning David Moyes on there, and of course he's not immune to criticism, and no manager can be. And like I said, the league table doesn't look great this morning, but I don't see how anyone can seriously be saying, questioning, less than a year with another Everton manager. I mean, it's a problem. We don't go down the Nottingham Forest route there and have, get on your third manager before the clocks go back. It's a very difficult, it's a very dangerous game to be playing there. And I think sometimes we've got to look at the bigger perspective. There's a lot to be sort of pointing the finger at this morning, and we're all angry, we're all frustrated with the way that game went, and maybe the way things have panned out the last couple of weeks or so. But I think sometimes you've got to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Yeah,
I don't think we need to go down that route at all. I mean, like you said, no one's immune from criticism, and we're here to observe and give our opinion and read out other people's opinions. I was just a little bit frustrated, obviously, from the result, but just his comments afterwards. So I'll read out a quote. He said, "Very little frustrated me because we actually played well. We've done a lot of good things. We've been undone by set pieces, so I'm not happy about that. But if you're saying to me about lots of other parts of the game, there were lots of other good things in the game which we'll need to do better in some aspects, but overall there were some positive performances." I just find that fairly astonishing, to be honest. I just think, just because you've had the lion's share of possession, you've created a good couple of chances, and maybe you could be deemed a little bit unlucky with refereeing decisions, that does just not constitute a good performance, especially when you're getting beat 3-0 at home, regardless of whether it's Tottenham on a good side.
But you also need to kind of have a little bit of a, step away from the emotion a bit. And yeah, I've just said that they've had most of the possession, they've created the better chances.
I don't know whether they created the better chances.
You don't think they created the better chances? I mean, do you not think before Richarlison comes on, did they have a decent chance from open play, Spurs? And I know set pieces are obviously a massive part, but I also think it's very difficult to have an inquest about set pieces when Everton are historically very, very good at defending set pieces.
No, I'm not.
That was the first set piece goal they conceded.
I'm not having a pop at that.
Since February, when they played against Thomas Frank's Brentford at the time. So I mean, I think that it'd be wrong to go down a rabbit hole and say all of a sudden they've got a problem defending set piece if they just came up with Arsenal, one of the best set piece sides in the league. And even then, we're a little bit unfortunate with the way that things panned out, because it could very easily go in a foul for the second goal, and the goal was rightly chalked off for O'Brien. But it's hard. Again, it's hard to not be a little bit frustrated, bearing in mind how little interference those players were playing in relation to Vicario stopping that effort. But they created better chances from open play. They didn't quite get the rub of the green with the decisions. you can only do so much. Sometimes football does just go against you that way, and and again, Tottenham are a very good side. Just look at the players they've got.
I just think it's a reoccurring theme the way we're playing, and you can place all the blame on the striker for missing chances. I'm not going to.
And I'm not doing that.
No, I know you're not doing it. A lot of people are. Obviously, it's just down to the striker, and to an extent, let me read a quote from what Moyes said to TalkSport about Beto now. So he was asked about the strikers, and he said, "It's a huge concern now. We want to give our players encouragement. We want to make sure we're incredibly supportive, which we are of the two of them. But ultimately, you're here to score the goals if you wear the number 9. We need to see if we're creating bigger. We need to see if we're creating bigger enough or good enough chances for them. But quite often as a striker, you have to find a way of getting that goal. That's your job. We'll keep encouraging them, but we need to do better." Look, I don't disagree with him. However, it's not just down to the striker for me. It's the build up. It's everything. It's passages of play. It's not being direct enough at times when you need to be direct enough. It's not having the support from the fullbacks because we know they're limited. It's the midfield trio, which I just don't think is working at this moment in time. You've already mentioned it yourself there. So I know he was asked the question, "Oh, you're not scoring goals, so you immediately look to the striker." But for me, that's throwing your strikers under the bus.
Yeah, well, look, he clearly backs. He wants Beto to succeed, but Beto has the limitations. Barry does because of his youth and his age, but so does Moyes and Everton in the transfer market because of where they've been for the last 5 years. And you're not going to get answers to all them, all those questions over the course of one summer, particularly when you look at how much work Everton had to do. And it sounds like a broken record here, but I started off this podcast by saying how we have to be honest about what we think this Everton side is capable of achieving this season. And maybe set our ambitions accordingly, because for all those frustrations you mentioned as recurring themes, this is also a side I think we'd all agree has had a pretty decent start to the season and could well have come away with a little bit more ruthlessness, which they don't have, admittedly. Could easily have come away from West Ham with having won that game. Should have beat Aston Villa. It was a tight penalty call against Leeds, albeit that was a very bad performance in the main. It was a frustrating performance, but Leeds didn't cut Everton open in that game. And they went toe-to-toe Man City for an hour and created chances to score, which he didn't score again, recurring theme, but they're creating the chance from open play with those players that Moyes is largely placing faith in. Second half at Anfield was good as well. And I just think that the reality is that this Everton side is probably going to be one of those teams in a tight league which just bounces between about 8th and 15th for most of the season, and we'll have lots of frustrations, but we'll also have good moments as well. And that probably is just the extent of what is achievable this season, I think. When you look at Spurs yesterday, just look at Spurs as a case in point yesterday. Last 5 years, look at the transfer market earlier. Last 5 years, Spurs' net spend is £650 million. Everton's is 15. If you want to make genuine sustained progress in the Premier League, you just have to do it layer upon layer upon layer with stability, transfer window after transfer window, of building up a squad. One of the problems that they had in the summer was they were trying to do almost too many things at once. They're trying to bring in young players that they can develop, because the way PSR works, the only way they're really going to make a sustained assault on the European places is by developing their own players, which can either turn into world beaters or who improve and they can sell at profit. But then they're also trying to get experienced players in, and they're also trying to cover the losses of the players that go, and very few of whom I think any of us had any issue with them going in as well. So it's just very, very difficult to do that. Spurs yesterday, they were without Maddison, they were without Destiny Udogie, they were without Kulusevski, they were without Solanke, they're without Christian Romero. That's 5 players there. Every one of those players would start for Everton, and they still got a starting lineup that's better than Everton. They still got João Paulina in centre midfield, very good player that Everton would have liked to have signed in the summer but couldn't, and would walk into that side. They still got Everton 60. The striker that they signed 60 million. We'd all love Richarlison to be at Everton, but they still got they got him on the bench. It's just very difficult. And I know people are looking at the Premier League table right now, and yes, there are outliers like Sunderland who've had a wonderful start to the season, and fair play to them. But people are looking at the likes of Bournemouth and the likes of Crystal Palace. I understand that we look at them through the veins of historically they're not as successful or big at clubs as Everton, and their fan bases aren't as big as Everton. But what they have had is they've had stability off the pitch and on the pitch for a number of years, and they've just gradually built on it. And that's why they are where they are. And, in 90 minutes, Everton aren't that far off most of these sides, but to do that time and time again over the course of a season is going to be difficult, because as I say, just look at the base at Everton. They've been fighting relegation. They've been fighting financial survival for the last few years. That isn't Moyes' fault. It's none of our fault either. But it's going to take time to address. And it is just going to lead to lots of frustration. And yes, there are things they can do better. I think Moyes needs to genuinely come away from last night, and he has to explore some, he has to explore some new avenues of how to better support Grealish, how to better support Ndiaye, maybe how to better use Beto or not use him at all. How to bring in Asnu, how to bring in Diblin, what he's going to do at the centre backs. But if anybody thinks that we were going to have solutions to all these problems, I do think better solutions could have been found to some of them. They should have signed a right back for a start. Whether they could go and find a striker in the transfer window, bearing in mind they had so much to do with the rest of the squad, I don't know that they really could have gone and spent £60 million on a striker. Not because they didn't have the money, but because of the outlay that had to go everywhere else. So it's going to be frustrating. It's going to continue to be frustrating. But that is kind of going to be part of the process.
No, look, it is frustrating and there is a lot of emotion. And if you obviously go and watch or listen to the show yesterday, there was certainly a lot of emotion within that. I don't disagree with the process of what we're trying to do. I think it's why everyone around this table is not calling for David Moyes' head. I think that's, a little bit ridiculous. I think my point is that, and you've both agreed with it to an extent in your points made in this podcast, is that some of his decision making seems to be impacting the team and hence results. And if he'd made different decisions, I think we might have been seeing different results. So I get all of you can't do everything in one window. And I'm of the pragmatic opinion where, well, again, I said it before, 10 games to go until we can at least sign anyone in the January transfer window. And even then, my expectations are quite low. We need to find solutions now. And I just don't think the manager is doing that at this moment in time. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure he is, but he's certainly not. He's not experimenting with that, is he? It's predictable. It's the same old. Don't get me wrong. The only reason he was forced into a change against Crystal Palace was because Kiernan Dewsbury was suspended. Even then, he had to go and change it at half-time because it wasn't working. City, he was forced into a change because Jack Grealish was unavailable to play, and then he just for the next game, after playing Charlie Alcaraz on the left-hand side, which clearly is not his best position, he just gets bombed out the side again. So there's quite clearly a number of factors there. You think, well, he's definitely going wrong there. He should be doing this there. I mean, we've all discussed that in this, and it is. I'm not looking at the bigger picture like that right now. I'm just looking at what he can do within these next 10 games before we can actually maybe address them in the transfer market. I think that's what I'm trying to suggest.
Yeah, well, I think we all agree that there are areas options that you can explore within the squad to maybe, certainly. I think it's almost less about the first 11 and more about what he does from the 60th minute onwards, regardless of the state of play. That's where I think is the issue. That's where I think that Everton have a deeper bench than they have. They have genuine options in the squad for the first time that they've had in years. Or so since the 5 subs rule came in. Getting them's one thing. Trying to figure out how to use them is another. I don't think he's using those substitutes as effectively as he could do.
Chris, we'll move on to another refereeing decision, which was a non-refereeing decision, really. After watching it back, I thought that the challenge from Mohamed Kudus on Idrissa Gana Gueye in the penalty area was a penalty for me. I don't know whether it was looked at by VAR. I mean, they say they look at all incidents. Obviously, being in the stands, in the south stand, you don't get that privilege of watching anything back. I just felt it was a barge, really, straight into him. He doesn't touch the ball, he doesn't win the ball, and I think anywhere else on the pitch, it's given as a penalty. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
It's just that frustration, like you say, that things don't seem to be looked at. I mean, we could say it was or it wasn't, but the same way with obviously Everton's goal, and I think ultimately, as much as it pained us, we were all like, okay, before that decision was made, we could see that was going to probably get ruled out, that they looked like they were both impeding. They were in and around the goalkeeper, so they were interfering with play. But then for Tottenham's one, when people saying Pickford got pushed and then brushed under the carpet, I think that's part of the frustration. Some are going to go for you, some are going to go against you. But there just seems to be maybe every team has this to a certain extent when they think, why is it always us or whatever. But there just seems to be a lot of ones with marginal calls. I mean, Joe talked about it, 50-50s, which could go one way or the other. But there's so many times when it keeps happening that the 50-50s will go against Everton. Everton's ones don't seem to be looked at, whereas the other ones do get looked at, and then ultimately you're going to go. I mean, with Craig Pawson there, he went over to the pitch side monitor, and there was an air of inevitability about it. Whereas with Everton, it's just a quick, let's get on with the game. And I think that's part of the concern. Not just that these decisions are going against Everton, and as Joe's mentioned as well, the Pedro Porro stamp. I mean, it was a stamp. It wasn't like a red card one, but he left a bit in on early doors on Grealish. So yeah, it's almost like when it's Everton, it's just get on with the game. Whereas the opponents, more often than not, we seem to be looking at it in more forensic detail. I think that was part of the concern. If you have seen with the derby last season and the Tarkowski equalised, we know it was for a long time they were looking at it, and whereas when it happens for Everton, it's like they'll quickly get on with the game.
I will address some of the comments. There was one comment here, Joe. I don't know what you think of this. Let me find it. It is from... Is it on the screen? It was about Jordan Pickford. Liam Dunn. Ian, can you please address why we seem to allow Pickford's performance yesterday to go without critique? Why is he immune? Was he a fault, do you think, or could he have done better for both goals?
Could have done better. We said at the start of the podcast that he could have done better. I mean, it's a difficult one because, like I say, I think he's got genuine claims to argue he might have been fouled in the build-up to the second one. Could he have done better with the other two? Yeah, he probably could have commanded his area better. But again, Everton don't historically have a problem dealing with set pieces, and Pickford's a big part of that, and they still dealt with a load of other set pieces relatively well against a side that's so good at attacking them. Yesterday it was 8 corners that they had. So it's tough, and you look at Everton had 9 corners, and Vicario didn't deal that much better with his. It was just one of the games where his clawed pour away bounces in their favour, whereas with Everton's it doesn't quite do that, and that's I'm not trying to look for easy excuses for yesterday, but I do think there are a number of things that you can look back on where it's not even, I'm not even asking for every decision or every 50-50 to go on our way, but say if Beto finds a way to finish in the first few minutes, because I do think that was a chance that he could have done better with, certainly done better, or if Vicario doesn't make all 3 of those good saves, if one of those goes in, or if the second goal from Van der Ven is pulled back for a foul, or if Kudos does give away a penalty for that, for that one in the second half on Gay. Say none of these are nailed on, but when they all go against Everton, that's when it gets a little bit frustrating, and I think that's why it's important not to get too carried away with the scoreline last night. And whilst there were frustrating elements to the performance, like with so many of the games that Everton haven't come away with wins this season, like with West Ham, like with Aston Villa, even like with Man City last week, maybe a little bit like Liverpool, maybe a little bit like Leeds, like so many of them, I think it's relatively fine margins that prevented them, that held them back. Some of them are the limitations of their own players. Some of them are the decisions of the manager. Maybe you can be a little bit more, inventive or a little bit more open to earlier changes. But some of them are just, maybe not bad luck, but maybe the course of a game can hinge on those key moments, and fine margins fell against Everton last night in the same way they might have fallen for them against Palace in the final half an hour of that game. And Everton, like I say, Everton have got enough talent in that side and enough capability in Moyes to be able to go toe-to-toe pretty much anyone in that Premier League. But what they can't quite do is they can't keep going toe-to-toe and keep getting positive results when they carry on missing chances, which is their own fault, and when or if decisions kind of that could go for them go against them. And it felt like everything conspired against Everton last night.
Chris, final question, I guess, before we just read out some comments and then we'll finish off. Moyes has always, been renowned for like a measured approach. He likes continuity. He doesn't like a lot of upheaval in a side, and we've seen that because the experimentation, in terms of what was suggested and what he could do is definitely not been there. And he does like players being in the team on merit. I think that's definitely one of being a staple of Moyes' team. But there's definitely players in that team who aren't playing to the best of their ability. Is there anyone where you think, well, we could drop and bring in and change it around a little bit?
I mean, there are options. We discussed it already, haven't we? I mean, the midfield mix, Merlin Roll come on now 3 times. He had the injury, so he he offers a different dimension. I was speaking to him about that. What time are we on now? 12:30. It'll be out there now, the piece, 12 o'clock with Merlin Roll. So that's certainly a different dynamic that he could play. I mean, Joe's already spoken about he could go and actually have 3 in the middle, so that could change things around. And as much as I think that Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall's a really special player, he needs to be doing more for me. I know obviously Ndai and Grealish have been lively on the wings, but I want to be seeing more from KDH as it were, because I know he's got it in his locker. And then obviously up top, we know just 1 goal between them all season in the Premier League. I mean, at what point we've mentioned it already, you know, and Iliman Ndai could go up top, maybe try that one out, and then maybe that's a way of getting Tyler Dibblin into side. But you know, as much as we're all clamouring for Dibblin and saying why did they spend all this money, we don't know if he's not quite showing it yet in training. Maybe he's not there. And we've mentioned Alcaraz, and he probably feel that he could be doing a role in that number 10 where Dewsbury Hall's currently deployed. So yeah, I wouldn't be messing about with the back forward at the moment. I know people have said about right back and moving Jake O'Brien into the middle, but I think the issues are more going forward. There's certainly scope for that, but maybe David Moyes doesn't see he sees them more than we do, obviously on a daily basis. But yeah, I think there are changes that you can make. There certainly are ways of freshening things up or mixing it up, as it were.
Just to jump in there as well, this is another area where I think we'll all agree on this, and not happily, but where I've been critical of Moyes this season is, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to have a Carabao Cup game right now, just to try and give a few more players a few more minutes, and maybe have a game where, albeit, look, you know, if Everton were in the Carabao Cup now, it wouldn't be a game with less pressure because we would want Everton to do well in it. But by playing the side that he did play against Wolves, and by falling, you know, I think that must be their only win of the season so far because they haven't won in the Premier League. But by doing that, again, it's just another avenue where the consequence, it hurts you in terms of trying to find answers to some of these questions, because you know, you wouldn't want Everton to throw away a game right now, but if maybe they had a game against, you know, there are lots of lower league opposition still left in the Carabao Cup, you know, the chances are that they would have either got a team that are from outside the Premier League that you could have made a few changes and still expected to win. So you could have had a look at the likes of your Diblins, your Rolls, maybe your Asnus and 1 or 2 other players. Or they end up playing against, you know, a side that, you know, perhaps if they take it seriously, like a Man City or like an Arsenal, you go, well, maybe, you know, if it's away from home, you want to give it a good game, but you accept that if both teams play to the best of their abilities, you're not going to come out on top, and therefore can try and experiment a little bit as well. And say, I'm really frustrated with, remain really frustrated with the manner of that Wolves defeat, mainly because I think it was a potential route to silverware, or at least a good cup run for Everton this season. But a secondary facet of that is that right now, at a time when there's probably a handful of players there that could do with minutes and that you could do with having a look at to see what they could maybe bring to the side. You don't have it, do you? So
it should be our aim for the season that we mentioned the Wolves game at least once every single podcast before the season ends. Yeah. So Joe's got us continuing on with that. Okay, I'll just read out some questions or some comments. Roy Nixon says the modern game is all about pace and we still have no pace. Why? Recruitment.
Well, but this is it. Like, pace matters if you're playing maybe counter-attacking football and that. But if the ambition of this Everton side is to play on the edge of the opposition box, and pace is less relevant, isn't it? And then it becomes more about skill, ingenuity, and guile. And we've seen that Grealish and Ndai in particular have that because they are creating chances from those positions, but aren't putting away those chances. So, yeah, pace may be holding back the side from maybe taking a different approach, but I don't. You're not gonna. I don't know if you're gonna play a counter-attacking football with Grealish in the side. I don't know. But it'd be nice to have more pace, but I don't think that isn't stopping them from having taken more points from some of these games.
Jack's Blues says same old story and same excuse. Could have scored a few. Should have scored a few. Same players letting us down. Mikalenko, Beto, and O'Brien playing right back compromises the defensive strengths.
I think the way in which those players are being used does compromise what the team can achieve. I think that it is the most evident area of where this side has its limitations. And I think we've been a theme of this podcast that we'd all like Moyes to maybe look at some of those areas, if not all of them, over the next few games, just to just to see if there is another option.
You've got a direct comment from Kevin Kraft, Joel. I expect you to address these concerns when you next speak to David Moyes.
Yeah, well, I tend to. Like, I mean, I don't say anything in here that, so if you watch the press conferences, you can, well, the ones that are the live, the post matches, you can maybe, particularly the one against Wolves, you can take a look and have a look at it.
Any final thoughts then, Chris, before we shoot off? We have done the hour, so...
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, it's a long time now, isn't it, to Sunderland? So I think, Joe, you're right there in terms of the Carabao Cup. Could have broken it up a bit. Yeah, with being the Monday nights. Yeah, it's not great at the moment, but we've just got to be a bit measured, haven't we? In looking at we're all frustrated today and the way things panned out, and it's not making excuses. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, all that, but. Yeah, things are generally moving in the right direction, but I think we've just got to have a bit of patience. And like I said, this means that we can't. Nobody's immune from that criticism, and it was a bad day at the office. But yeah, I think we've just all got to have a perspective, and hopefully, I think things pick up at Sunderland, and it's a big game, isn't it? Because obviously Jordan Pickford going back there, and David Moyes as well. So yeah. Join me and Joe for that one. Hopefully, we'll be talking a bit more positively next week.
It'll be a really interesting one. What's the run of fixtures? It's Sunderland, Fulham,
international break,
and yes, the break before United, isn't it?
Sunderland and Fulham. That's the two.
Then Newcastle after United.
They're two interesting games, those, aren't they? Everton could
not got a great record against Fulham at home over the past couple of years.
No, Fulham have been a bogey side. Well, they were all under Dyche, weren't they? I think.
Yeah, put that right. Yeah, can put that right because for years, obviously, Fulham never won at Goodison in the league for decades. So yeah.
So I mean, I don't think there's any need for panic. It's interesting as well because I think one area one facet of this season which is new is that in any of the previous seasons you normally get a couple of sides that really, from the off, just look off the pace. And right now, you can maybe make that argument about West Ham and Wolves, but the fear with them is because they're relatively well-established Premier League sides that you kind of fear eventually they'll sort themselves out. I think the way the promoted sides have started, and with them all picking up wins at the weekend, and with Brentford as well, having seemed to have overcome the loss of Thomas Frank and Visser and Mbuemo, that's made it a little bit tighter, hasn't it? Normally it's a lot easier to be more relaxed about, say, the inconsistencies of this Everton side, and maybe a roller coaster of a season if there are 3 or 4 teams at the bottom that you just know aren't going to touch you, and that's a bit of a danger this season. But I don't think this is a season Everton have to worry about relegation or anything like that. It's going to be interesting. So.
Okay, just to let everyone know who's watching, listening, that I am speaking to a Sunderland fan tomorrow, and that is for a show that is going out on Wednesday, and then hopefully Joe and Chris, or maybe Gav, will be back on Friday because I'm off, I'm not here, so hopefully there will be a show
Another
Friday.
Holiday, Ian?
Half term, isn't it? Okay, thanks to Chris and Joe. This has been the Royal Blue Podcast. Thank you for joining.